want to see more of the students who aren't sure that they're really college material find themselves in that environment and really find themselves and discover that I really didn't necessarily excel in K through 12, but here in this environment, it's different. Mm-hmm. And learning is not what I thought it was. So that's what I hope that we can continue to build, especially for the students who might not see themselves that way.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. You've joined us for another episode of Cap and Gown. I'm Rachel Phillips-Buck, VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, joined today by Matt Boisvert, our president. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
I'm okay, but I am very froggy. We were just talking about the West Texas wind is whipping everything around. And so my throat is kind of sore. And if you've listened to us for a long time, you've heard this story before, but I know it's advising season right now. And the way I know is because when I was an advisor in Abilene, I was feeling very similar to the way that I'm feeling right now. And I was filling out and advising an agreement for a student. We were leaning over it together, and a drip came out of my nose and landed on the advising agreement, plop. And I was like, that is horrifying. I'm so sorry. So then I had to throw it away and do another one. But every time I start to feel this way, I'm like, oh, time for advising.
Yeah. I wonder if he remembers that as much as you do.
How could you not? How mortifying. Can you imagine?
At one time, my advisor dripped.
You go back to your rest hall and you're like, you're never going to believe what just happened to me. It's pretty bad.
Pretty bad.
I'm super excited about our guest today. We talked about her a little bit last week. We've known her forever, and she's just done such a great job of shaping student success at her institution. So I can't wait to introduce everyone to Debi. First, we have some business we have to do. So we will not be together next week. Next Tuesday is Election Day. But we do have to talk about our curiosity theme. And Matt, we're going to have to start thinking about a new one. We only have November, December. We only have 2 more months of curiosity.
And it just works out because I'm almost done with this book.
Really?
So,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
We've done a really good job. I just have to, I'm wearing my glasses today. I scratched my eye. I went and saw my eye doctor this morning. I've got an abrasion on my right eye. And let me just tell you, at first I thought it was an eyelash, and then it just got worse. So anyway,
it's fine.
Wearing my glasses today.
It reminds me of when your son got a little bruise and you were like, oh gosh, what are we going to do? It's a contusion. And he freaked out and was like, what's a contusion? And you're like, it's fine. Basically, an abrasion is the same idea, except you have a little scratch on your eye. It's okay.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Well, would you like to do your curiosity facts from your National Geographic Brain Candy book?
Sure. Let's do it.
Okay.
All right. So I asked Debi if she was a cat or a dog person. Next time I'll cover cats. But Debi's a dog person, as am I, and as are you.
A lot of our team are dog people.
So here are some fun facts about dogs. You may know all of this, but
okay.
Dogs have super senses. They smell separately with each nostril, helping them figure out where smells are coming from.
That's amazing. How does your brain pay attention to that,
Yeah, right. But it's over here. Yeah. But that's why they find their toys so well.
Yeah.
They have special taste buds specifically devoted to water. Huh? Okay.
That's going to be on my Google search next week because I don't understand what you just told me, but it's fine. Keep going.
Yeah. I don't know. Are your dogs picky about water? I used to have a dog who he really only wanted cold water. It had to be like fresh cold.
My dog's brains are so small. They could not be picky about water.
That's sad. Okay. Dogs hear sounds 4 times farther away than humans can, which makes sense to me at the middle of the night when my dogs are freaking out. I'm like, what is your
something's
problem?
going on in the neighborhood. You just don't know about it. Yeah.
And finally, their entire bodies are covered with touch-sensitive nerve endings.
Isn't that how is that different from what we are?
I don't know. It just
Okay.
they thought
I
it
don't
was
feel like
important.
National Geographic.
I don't know if maybe cats aren't wired that way. I don't know. Cats don't act like they're, But,
yeah.
All right, next time is cat.
All right. Well, our Google searches. Why don't you go first, Matt? Why don't you tell me about
Did you learn? Was that good on dogs? You're happy with that?
No, it really wasn't. I don't understand the water taste buds, and I don't understand like their skin has nerves in it. Right. That's not, I don't feel like that's news. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but that's not your fault. That's National Geographic. All right.
You want me to do my top Google searches?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is fun. And so the first one is Texas crop production, which led to a whole article on what crops are top crops grown in Texas and how it compares to the top 3 states in the nation for everything. Okay. Anyway, hay is on the list as a top crop. It's not the top crop, obviously cotton. Grouper fish. Had to look that up. Home Depot Allen.
What was the second one?
Grouper fish.
Oh,
a grouper.
Okay.
Number 3, Home Depot Allen wrench set.
Do they sell them? Was that the question?
Well, I had to show a picture of what I needed my sister to buy me.
Oh, I see.
To help. Okay, this weekend. Number 4, scariest movie list, which 'tis the season for scary movies.
I know, we've got 2 more days of that. I haven't watched a single scary movie.
And apparently there are some real scary movies that I've never seen. And I grew up watching scary movies. So
yeah.
And finally, Disney top hat. I don't have to say why, but that was a Google search.
I don't have to say why. You don't
Princess and the Frog.
Why?
It's Olivia wanted to wear a top hat to school today.
Oh.
And this was her Disney.
That's fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. Here's what I've got. I don't know. These are weird. Like I don't know. Number 1, Noah Kahan, Dead Fingers, which there's a song called Everywhere, Everything. And I knew it was something about dead fingers, but I couldn't remember exactly what it is. The actual lyric is everywhere, everything. I want to love you till we're food for worms to eat, till our fingers decompose. Keep your hand in mine. Don't ask me why. Number 2, purple buns at Burger King. Do you know that Burger King has a Wednesday Addams sandwich that has purple hamburger buns?
No.
Okay. Well, it does.
Okay.
Number 3, how big is a PowerPoint slide? Do you know how big a PowerPoint slide is?
It's as big as you want it to be. But 1920 by 1080 is what I would,
it's 16 by 9.
9, yeah.
And then lastly, how does a tile work? Because I have a story about how in the last couple of months I lost my keys. We couldn't find them anywhere. Z was visiting, didn't know where they were. I had to drive her back to Austin. Yushi and I were in the car driving back to Austin. I got up to 80 miles an hour. We heard something slide off the top of my roof. Z was like, those were your keys. I was like, oh, shoot, you're right. We never found them. I bought a tile. Now I have a tile on my keys. So that's what's going on in my brain. Let's do State of the Union. All right. There's an article coming out of Inside Higher Ed about how higher institutions this fall experienced the steepest drop in first-year enrollment since COVID-19. While overall post-secondary enrollment is up by 3%, which is the second straight year of growth, our first-year enrollment fell by more than 5%, which is a pretty drastic change from our last year 1% increase. So enrollment among 18-year-olds declined by 6%, slightly more than first-year applicants of all ages. Four-year institutions saw the largest decline, with an 8.5% drop at public colleges and a 6.5% decline at nonprofit privates. And institutions that serve the highest number of Pell eligible students had the highest first-year enrollment fall, which was 10%. So again, I'm not going to say the FAFSA word, except I just did, but that's what they're assuming this is about.
Yeah.
What's really interesting is white student enrollment fell more than other groups. So first year white enrollment declined by 11.6% from last year. Black enrollment fell by 6%, and Hispanic and Asian enrollment was about stable, with the decline of just about 1%.
Wow.
In contrast, community college enrollment grew slightly this fall by 1.2%. The assumption is that is because students didn't know how much money they would get from Pell, so they chose a lower cost option instead of enrolling in a four-year institution. So the nearest kind of corollary we have to this is in 2020, fall of 2020, so right after the pandemic. First year enrollment fell 7%. And remember, we tracked those students for 2 years, and almost none of them came back to college or enrolled in college. So it's very hard once a student kind of gets on a track to not be in college to then get them to come back for the next year.
You know, we're seeing this with our schools as we're doing our Spark meetings, but so that's mostly looking at retention. But as far as first-time freshmen and the size of this year's cohort, we're seeing that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just totally an unforced error, and it's pretty tragic for a lot of schools, because this smaller cohort, that's going to go all the way through for the next 4, 5, 6 years. You're going to see that.
Yeah.
And it's not the school's fault.
Right. That's right. I'm very excited about this new federal student success recognition program. So we talked really briefly about this the other day. It was announced in April. And basically, these are colleges on this list where they're trying to reimagine, like if the US News and World Report, like impressive schools were those that prepared graduates well to enter the workforce and lead fulfilling lives and careers. So they have this new list that they've created, a lot of different metrics. They're looking at things like access, completion, and post-graduation. They basically took schools and said, first of all, they have to admit 50% of their applicants, or they have to be a historically Black college or university. Then they have to have a student body that's at least half as racially and socioeconomically diverse as their state population. Then they have 16 additional metrics, like the number of Pell Grants, students of color, median earning of graduates, percentage of students retained. So the top 200 scoring schools were invited to apply for this recognition. Matt, I want to tell you, I feel really proud. We serve 9 schools on this list: Roxbury Community College, Albright College, Juniata, Linfield, Simpson, Dominican, Westmont, Felician, and North Park. So awesome. Shout out to you guys. Awesome job. That's one of the reasons we love serving you so much. But I think it's a really interesting way to define what the outcome of college is. Now, the caveat to that is there's a lot of unhappiness around the gainful employment metrics, because you have people who are saying like, well, I mean, I'm not going to be, an economist. I'm going to be a minister. I'm going to be a school teacher. And so that gets a little bit wacky, but I'm just happy to have a list of schools doing incredible work.
Yeah. Well, we do love those lists. I mean, we always talk about I'm having that phantom drip right now. Like you're check that. When it really isn't impressive if you have a really high input incoming class, right? Like high school GPA, high ACT, SATs, all the things, wealthy, yada yada. If all you do is just you have a nice output, and they get a job, your goal should be to not mess them up.
Yeah.
Right? But I love schools that take these 18-year-olds and shape them and inspire them and really give them a belief and and how they're uniquely created, right? And what they can accomplish, and then set them up for success beyond. That's really exciting.
Yeah.
I know you feel the same way. That's really good work.
Yeah, for sure. It is.
So this is a great measure.
Yeah, it is. It makes me feel very happy. Inside Higher Ed just published an article. It's 12 pages. You guys, they have mixed into it student voice data, which I am not unhappy about the data. I just can never understand the way they present it. So I'm not going to try to. But the first half of this article, they have just launched the Inside Higher Ed's inaugural survey of undergraduate student success administrators. So this is a really big deal because they have done this on the academic side. They do this for students. This is their very first survey of our student success administrators at 2- and 4-year institutions. They partnered with Hanover Research. I think they invited like 2,500 people. They only got 200 responses, which for your first try, I understand, like it's not entrenched yet. Like people don't know this is a thing that we have to fill out. But in general, people are really happy about the work that student affairs are doing on a campus. So a couple of highlights, but like I said, 12 pages, I would go and get this article and read it. Nearly all student success leaders rate the quality of education for undergraduates at their institution as good or excellent. About 6 in 10 student success leaders say their institution is very or extremely effective at making student success an institutional priority, which that's pretty impressive. 8 in 10 student success leaders say their institution is doing a good or excellent job at promoting and supporting undergraduate mental health. And then most student success leaders say involvement in an extracurricular activity or event is very or extremely important to undergraduates' overall well-being, both while they were in college and with residual benefits after. But leaders estimate just 4 in 10 students are involved in 1 to 3 regular extracurricular activities. So basically, they're like, hey, that's a really good practice. Our students aren't necessarily taking advantage of it.
Yeah. Well, we know it's important. Only 40% of our students are doing it. How do you change that, right? So
Yeah.
I always love when we go to a campus and we meet with those who are involved in student involvement. You know, you really figure it out. Like these are people who understand what that role really is about. It's not just like playing games or
Right. Yeah.
but it really is about, hey, we want them to be a part of our community and for them to meet people doing things. It's a great opportunity for introverts to feel connected, to connect with other people. Yes, I'm talking to you.
That's a terrible opportunity. Shauna the other day was like, who would use this tool online? And I was like, me. I would use that tool so I don't have to talk to anybody ever about trying to figure the thing out. Matt, the other thing I really like about this article is they're basically calling out student success professionals as not doing a great job collecting and analyzing student success data, which we know is true. I think a lot of times student success people are just really busy and they're not doing that. And you and I are saying all the time, you have to have the data to tell people about the work you're doing. A quote here is data related to students' use of services such as coaching, tutoring, mentoring, res life, advising could also provide insight to the extent to which students are having positive experiences that contribute to their overall success. So if you want to tell everybody about the impact that you're having, you have to use data to explain to them, here's the increase in retention we're seeing, or here's how many hours we're spending with students. Because without that data, it is covered, right? Like it's not transparent.
Yeah, right. It can be invisible.
Right.
And to your point, I think a lot of people in student life aren't data oriented. They're people oriented, right? That's why they want to do it. But finding a partner, and we've always talked about that creative partner, find your geeky partner who wants to help you. And I think that's where, what we've been able to do, like you're more people oriented, I'm more data oriented. And it's a nice combination where you're like, I don't want to do all the finding. Can you just
tell me who it is? Yeah. For sure. All right. I have 2 articles here that I really think are worth a read. I can't do them justice. The first one is out of The Atlantic. It's called ChatGPT Doesn't Have to Ruin College. So this is a journalist who is trying to figure out like what's actually happening on campuses with Chat GPT. He decides to go visit two schools, Haberford and Bryn Mawr, who are very, very close to each other. They're both in Philadelphia. Haberford has Quaker roots, and Bryn Mawr is a smaller school. The premise of this article is that the challenge posed by ChatGPT for American colleges and universities is not primarily technological, but cultural and economic. It is cultural because stemming the use of ChatGPT requires an atmosphere in which a credible case can be made on a daily basis that writing and reading have a value that transcends this particular assignment or a resume line item or career milestone. So it's cultural because we have to be teaching our students every day, hey, this is worth your investing in. But it is economic because this cultural infrastructure isn't free. Academic honor and intellectual curiosity do not spring from some inner well called character, or at least they don't only spring from that. Honor and curiosity can be nurtured or crushed by circumstance. So he goes on to say that as he's talking to students on this campus, they're like, we love reading, we love writing. We don't want to give that up. We don't want to outsource that. Like we really feel that's how we're learning. But he goes on to say it's a luxury for them to do that. He says it's one thing to be mad at ChatGPT when you have professors who are available for office hours and on-campus therapists who can counsel you if you're stressed out and tutors who are ready to lend a hand if you have writing block. It's another thing when you're a single mother trying to squeeze in homework between shifts or a non-native English speaker who has nowhere to turn for a grammar check. So this luxury of like, oh, we don't need that help because we have this infrastructure that's set up to support us when we need it, right? Versus I don't have time to come to the tutoring center when it's open because I'm working all the time or I have a young family or whatever. So I think it's worth the read. I'm not willing yet to say much more about it because I need to think about it a little bit, but it's a very interesting perspective on the use of AI on our campuses.
Well, just a couple of things that you brought out of that article. So again, definitely want to go read it. When you talk about economics, I think about incentives. What's the incentive to use this or not use this? And I had a great conversation with my son about his view of ChatGPT and why he really doesn't want to use it. But when it comes to incentives, there's also opportunity costs. So as you highlighted, like if I need this grade and I have this happening at home and my time is limited, here's a crutch.
Yeah.
But then it comes down to expected future value. And can I get away with letting AI run this assignment for me and it won't hurt me in the future? Right. Or
yeah,
if
I agree with you, but also I would say sometimes you're making the now calculation and like I'll figure it out later, right? Like what I need now is an A, I'll figure out what's going to happen in the future versus like actually I have capacity and time to invest in the process right now, which not everybody does, right? So it's I think there's a lot to say about it. I think we need to
I really love what you highlighted, which the culture piece of like these are people who we've all kind of bought into this learning together.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Two more for you. There's an article in Esquire called The Secret Crisis Affecting College RAs. I would recommend you read it. It's kind of this underlying piece about unionization and how that's happening in really big campuses for RAs. But there's a lot of really good stuff here about the stress of the job, the lack of support, the lack of communication, the way that we can resource our RAs well, and the fact that a lot of RAs are disproportionately low income students who need that housing stipend. So they're stressed in a lot of different ways, have multiple jobs, right? It's a long read. It's 13 pages. So I would recommend that. And then the last one I have for you, Matt, is I love this. DePaul, which you know is in Chicago.
That's great.
They have this awesome program where all of their students, their first year students, enroll in either Discover Chicago, which is a week before school starts. They spend a week going all of the places in Chicago that you would want to go. Or they have Explore Chicago, which is 3 excursions throughout the academic year. So it's classes of 22. It's around a specific theme. So it's like, do you want to do architecture or literature or food or sports or social justice? And then you have faculty who are just all day long, like riding the train with their students. Like, here, we're going to go to this museum and then we're going to eat at this place. And the outcome of that is that students love it. They make friends. Yeah. They have close connections with their faculty. They're not afraid of the city. So they're really acclimated to, like, how do you ride public transportation? And they count it as one of the formative things in their first year. I would love to do that.
Okay. So we don't have time. I know you have Debbie but this is so awesome, thinking about what we talk about. And I think you may talk to her a little bit about how do you overcome FTF zeros or students who come in without any transfer credits. This is a way. And how do you get them connected to, I think about, coming into Abilene and getting introduced to Abilene a week beforehand, and like how that's different, especially if you're with a faculty member who's fun and actually could show you fun parts of this community.
Well, Matt, it's funny because I just started, I have a new mentee. I have a new mentee. She's a student at one of our colleges. And I was saying, you've been here since August. What have you done in Abilene? And she's like, I don't have a car. I haven't done anything.
Oh.
And I was like, right. I remember that feeling of like, we're not a huge city, but there are things that you could do that would be really, really fun. And facilitating students kind of learning about that, I think, is really awesome. So I have a list for her.
Hey, that's a great one.
Here's where we're going to go. So it's going to be great. All right. Well, that is the State of the Union. So I'm going to kick you out and I'm going to bring in Debi Rutledge.
Thanks.
From Rochester University. How are you?
I'm doing great, Rachel. How are you?
I am doing so well. I get very excited about this idea of going around town with students, like introducing that. It's so, how would they know all the great things to do in your city, I
actually saw that this morning, and I need to email our student life, because we have the Monday before Thanksgiving in downtown Rochester. We have this event called Lawn Yop.
Okay.
So they close down the street. It's packed with people. Rochester is not that big, but then that's the kickoff of the big bright light show. Google it. We are well known for the lights in Rochester. They hang them up in October. They turn them on the first time at Lawn Yop. It's this big celebration. They have fireworks. And I was like, we need to make sure our students know about that, because while you can spend money at the shops downtown, it can also be free.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite price.
I do like a good free thing. Well, Debbie, you're the Dean of Student Success and Retention. And there's so many things I could say about you. First of all, you are our Outstanding Student Success Professional winner for 2022 for our Lighthouse Award. So we obviously think very highly of you for that. But you've been in higher education for 30 years doing so many different things. I think you started in financial aid, admissions, financial aid, res life, advising, and here you are now in charge of student success and retention, which you've only done since May of 2020. Is that right?
Basically, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, everything kind of morphs. I'm in a smaller institution, so anybody at a smaller institution, probably at any institution, knows about wearing multiple hats. But yes, one thing morphs into another.
That's right. It's like a free flow, right? You're just like, now I guess I'm doing this thing. Yeah. You and I have a couple of other things in common. So you and I are both graduates of the MFT program from ACU. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. I think I always say makes you very well suited to be in higher education, because it's just like a very big family where you're trying to figure out all the stuff that's going on. But also you're in the middle of your PhD program for education leadership and policy at Lipscomb. How is that going?
It's going very well, actually. I thought the spring semester, I started a year ago fall, and I thought the spring semester was going to kill me. But I discovered balance and that it is unwise to put in dissertation level effort when you are not yet working on your dissertation.
Yeah, for sure.
So
you and I started at the same time.
Yep.
And this summer I thought was going to kill me. This summer I was just like, I don't know if I can do this. So now by comparison, my workload this semester, I'm nervous because I'm like, this feels like I should be doing more stuff. I'm really,
Yes. Yes.
like, am I forgetting something? What's happening? So it is a journey for sure that I'm glad we can share together. Okay, so I always start with just an understanding from you of your experience in your undergraduate degree. You talked, when we were talking about this before, just about kind of faculty mentoring and that relationship, which we know is a cornerstone of students being successful on a campus. Can you just talk a little bit about what that experience was like for you as an undergraduate?
Sure. Yeah, you had asked kind of what was the most formative thing. And what I immediately thought of, we were a very, very small institution when I was a student. We had about 300 students. In the 80s and 90s, you could actually do that. It's not sustainable in most places now. But it was very small. We had almost everybody lived on campus, and we had our academic dean and his wife. He was also a psychology professor, and his wife taught English. But they really were great. Everybody was great about opening their homes, but they were the mentors that I latched onto. My, I guess, boyfriend at the time, husband now, I haven't said boyfriend in like 30 years, but my husband, my now husband, they mentored us in so many ways. They would have us over for dinner like every Tuesday night. There was a group of us that would have dinner there. So we built relationships with other students as well as with them. And they really were role models for me getting into higher education and just seeing what they were doing and the way that they impacted student lives. He was very instrumental as I was trying to figure out what to do after I graduated with my undergraduate, which I actually took a family systems class with him after I graduated that led me to ACU.
Awesome. It's such a good example of, we're always talking about find the connectors. So this modeling of like, we're going to bring all these people together and I'm going to show you how you can connect with them and have this kind of safe space for you to be. It's such a good example. I always think it's funny. Like, what do people remember about their undergraduate experience? It's always people, and it's oftentimes food in a faculty member's house. Right. It's a very powerful signal that we can send to our students. So you've done all of these different things in higher education. How does it help you have this more kind of comprehensive understanding of what's happening in an institution versus like a very specialized or siloed perspective?
Well, I think it does just that. I started out as the secretary in the admissions office right after I graduated. I did that for about a year, and then they were like, oh, we need a new director of financial aid. You should do that. We were very small. So, and it just kind of, that gave me skills that let me work in financial aid when I was at ACU. And then I came back and I was the dean of enrollment. Learned sales was not for me.
Yeah.
And, one thing led to another, different roles, but I think it helps to have that holistic view. It certainly helps with the working relationships at the institution. So I suppose it helps the students also because I have perhaps a broad view of their experience, but I think that I find that it really helps as I'm working with my colleagues in other departments because I have a base of knowledge in most of the areas that helps me kind of bridge gaps and work things. Like I am extremely student-centered, student-focused, and I see myself as an advocate for students. That has probably always been the case. Knowing how things work in financial aid helps me to approach that advocacy in a way that is very respectful of my colleagues who are like, it's their job to make sure we're following the rules. Right. So because I have a good working understanding of the rules, then that helps me to advocate in ways that only sometimes makes more the office of the registrar want to pull their hair out. I try to be so kind to them because they do such a good job of giving us those parameters. Like, somebody has to make sure we're following the rules.
Yeah.
So that I can say, hey, what about this rule?
Right.
But understanding the whole institution, I think, helps me to find solutions when a student has an issue.
Yeah, it's funny because it gives you a healthy respect for your colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And it also puts you on the same team, right? Like, you're like, listen, you have stuff that you're worried about that I'm not thinking about. I respect and understand those things. How can we stand next to each other and be like, what are we going to do for the student? Instead of it feeling like, why are you being such a jerk? So worried about the rules. So you don't get shut down. That's why I'm being such a jerk, right? So yeah,
Right.
I think it's really helpful. And also, I don't know if you found this, Debbie, but like, using the right language with your partners makes such a big difference. And I think it is, it really is a shortcut to being able to work together. So when I say this thing that is very specific to your office and what you have to do, all of a sudden you feel like, oh, Rachel understands what she's talking about, and she's not making assumptions, and she's not just kind of coming in like a bull in a china shop and saying, here's what we're going to do. So I think it's really helpful. It bleeds into this next idea that, you know, when we're talking about family, marriage and family therapy and family systems, the idea that you can change one little thing and it changes your whole system. And also that we're not looking at problems to diagnose, this is the problem, and if we can just fix this, then everyone's going to be happy. That we have this perspective of, we may have an identifying problem, but what's keeping it there is all of this other stuff, right, that's going on around it. And so we can make these small adjustments. How do you, maybe I'm crazy, do you use this idea of systems theory in your work at an institution? Is it a helpful like framework for you or not?
Yes and no. I think that I wish that I spent more time thinking, like, actually cognizantly making the connections that, oh, systems, right. It's like you said that about, one part affects the other. I was like, oh, I mean, I know that to be true. And I believe that it's so much a part of my DNA that I just do things without necessarily thinking about them.
Yeah.
But I liked that question because it really reminded me to pause and think more clearly about how some of the dynamics of some of the things that we're working with, maybe having that intentional systems view might help me to generate some different solutions.
Well, we'll talk about your Warrior Thrive, but just reading your paper in that, I just see so many places where it's like one little change, gigantic outcome of what you did there. So
For sure.
I think you and I were saying earlier, sometimes it's hard when it's so ingrained in you that you don't have a good way to articulate it, or to say, like, the reason I'm doing this is because of this. But it for sure is, once you've learned systems theory, you can never get away from it ever. It's just ingrained in you forever. You said something in this approach to student success and retention that we're trying to move our students from transactional to transformational. And the reason I bring it up is because I'm finding more and more on campus that students actually don't have an understanding of the difference of these things in college education, that they're showing up with an expectation of a transactional, I need a degree and I'm going to get a career. And that actually there's a lot of pressure on us to articulate and help them understand this transformational piece of what we're doing. So why is that one of the prongs that you're using as you're thinking about student success and retention?
Well, you phrased that completely differently than I read it. So let me pause for a second. I think that, like, students may not come expecting a transformation. Some students do. I think that the university experience is still billed as, this is the time where you establish, you're going to discover new things, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
I do think that our society is much more focused on the transaction, and some of the tension in higher education is related to that. It is very important to consider return on investment, but it is also difficult to measure the transformation.
Yeah.
So in my interactions, in the interactions that my team has with our students, sometimes we are just transactional. Here are the classes that you need to take, especially, you're working on the unregistered list, and we hit a point where let me just get you registered.
Right.
But it's the transformation. It's the taking a moment to sit with even little things like an email check-in with an advisee can be transformational when you do that semester after semester, and then they hit a bump and they realize that somebody cares. That's part of the transformation. It's really, I think, serving as a conduit for students to find. We talk a lot about vocation at Rochester. So that is one of our pillars, is helping students find their vocation, not just a job. Yes, we want you to get a job. We want you to be self-sufficient. We would love for you to become donors for the institution later. But what we want more is for you to have a purposeful, meaningful life where you are thinking and looking beyond yourself.
Yeah.
And that's part of that transformation. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting because it's almost like in our language of trying to convey the ROI, we have missed but this other thing that is really, really important and that we need to make sure that we're including. I was thinking about, I just got a picture from one of our clients on a university, and they were saying, this is how our faculty member returns tests, and he tapes them outside of the door. So it's a picture of his office with tests taped all over the door that students just come by and pick up. And I'm sure there's some good reasons for that, right? But if you want to talk about transactional versus transformational, how much more clear can you be that this is a transaction? I took a test, I'm going to come and pick it up, and then I'm just going to move on, versus, Rachel, come in and see me. Let's talk about what you got wrong and how do you feel about it, and the process of that. So it's a really interesting, I think it's very helpful language for us to be teaching on our campus. Because you do have offices who say, I just do transactions. And I would say, exactly like you did, sometimes you are just doing a transaction, but you can imbue into all of that this piece of transformation, because it doesn't take much. It just takes someone saying, hi, I see you. How's it going? Right?
Right.
Okay, we were laughing about unconditional positive regard, which for sure comes out of counseling. And I think there's some elements of this. So when I talk about that, I'm like, how does a student show up in my office without shame or fear, right? We talk about this in terms of psychological sense of safety. We talk about it in terms of joining with our students. How do those things affect how you engage with your students?
I mentioned Carl Rogers. I love Carl Rogers.
Yeah.
We didn't learn that at ACU. I actually learned a lot when I started teaching theories of counseling.
Oh, yeah.
After I graduated. Funny how that works. But I think that unconditional positive regard, that meeting somebody where they are with no expectations of who they're going to be. A lot of times, like in counseling, people would confuse that, students would confuse that with just accepting all behavior. Well, I don't accept your behavior. So you just use ChatGPT to completely write your discussion post. This is a problem.
Right.
But you are not a problem. Like, you are a person who I care about. Yeah. So instead of, well, you're a terrible student, how dare you plagiarize, you're failing, the question is, hey, what's going on here? I've had this experience with you. I know you in this context. What's happened here isn't going to work, but let's talk.
Yeah.
So that the student then still feels, when I was in Res Life, one of my favorite things that I like to do, I really didn't like doing conduct, but I have a gift. And so I could have a student in for a discipline meeting, suspend them, and have them leave thanking me.
Yeah. So good.
Because even though they violated some rule and I was responsible for carrying out the discipline, most of the time they were able to leave my office feeling validated as people.
Right.
Which hopefully then motivates them to come back, to make better choices, to stay engaged in the college experience, and that is going to help them move on to what's next in a successful life.
It's so good, Debbie. I read the other day someone saying what we're trying to tell our students is, hey, I care about you, and everything that we're about to do is in the context of that relationship. So whether it's you're in trouble or you did a great job or we have to have a hard conversation, you need to know that everything that's about to happen is in the context of this relationship where I care about you and I see you and I just want the best thing for you. So I think
absolutely.
And that is something that students sense from you. We're all so sensitive to shaming and you're in trouble. And so the unconditional positive regard as an idea is super easy, but showing up in a space in full unconditional positive regard is very, very hard because they will sniff it out if you are at all like, what's wrong with you, right?
Right.
Okay, I want to move on to Warrior Thrive because it is such a good example. I think about over the years, all of the time that you and I have spent together in a lot of different ways, and the way that you have sort of embraced this idea of we're not going to talk about deficits. We're not going to tell our students you're in trouble and you shouldn't be doing this and that was wrong and all of those things. And out of those conversations, you have this great idea around your conditionally admitted students, which was to come up with this program called Warrior Thrive. So can you tell us what problems are you trying to solve as you're rethinking what you're doing for your conditionally admitted students?
So we are not quite an open enrollment institution, but I think that I'm not exaggerating if I say that we probably admit about 97% of the students who apply. So we have a very high acceptance rate. If we believe that you can actually do it, then we're going to let you in. However, we have a history where well, first of all, we used to refer to them as alert students, which, I mean, it's so much easier to say, but it's not necessarily helpful. Thank you. You actually are one of the people who really kind of brought that to my attention that, oh, we should probably change our language. But those students who were conditionally admitted were failing at extremely high rates, much, much higher rates, or stopping out. Even if they didn't fail academically, and a lot of them did, they were stopping out at a much higher rate.
Yeah.
They also, our conditionally admitted students are a higher proportion of our students of color. I have not looked at the data, but I would guess that they're probably higher proportion first generation students. So we hit a point when I became responsible for retention where I'm like, I know us. We're good people. We have good intentions. I'm really big on intention versus impact these days.
Yeah.
And our intentions were good. Our intentions with admitting these students were good. We want to give students the opportunity, but the impact that we were having didn't necessarily measure up to that. Yeah. And so, my team working together, we were like, okay, so if we're saying we believe that you can succeed, but our data says that there's a really good chance you're not going to succeed, then we have to do more to stand in the gap and make sure that you are equipped if you're willing to take hold of it. Some students want the opportunity, but they're not willing to take hold of it. But there are a lot of students who just needed more help. Yeah. So that's kind of what motivated me to really rethink and pull in other partners to rethink this. And we really built on some of the things we were already doing. Our ACE team, our Academic Center for Excellence, they had already been doing academic coaching. Like there were systems in place. They had started actually through the ACE, they had started a practical applications of learning strategies class, so a study skills class, 2 or 3 years before it came to me. And then, so we looked at kind of revamping and enhancing those two pieces, and then added a third piece of creating a 3 or 4 week seminar fully online, because we're not at a place where we're recruiting students who can just take 4 weeks off to come to campus before classes start. So we started this Warriors Thrive seminar that's based in growth mindset, grit, relationship, introduction to college, just all sorts of things that gets them into Canvas so that they get used to navigating a learning management system. And if the students actually will do this, so we automatically, we enroll all of our conditionally admitted students. We then invite all of the rest of the new students. If they're first time in college students, they are invited to participate in this, and they can self-enroll. But the conditionally admitted students don't have to do anything except accept my invitation and actually engage in the modules.
Yeah.
So does that give you kind of the foundation for what you're looking for?
For sure. So the two things that I want to kind of call out about your process is, first of all, I think you guys did such an exceptional job of being like, what are the problems with what we're doing, right? And you have said, like, first of all, there's no teeth, which this used to make me crazy. I was in academic recovery, we called it probation counselor. And students would say, if I don't do anything you just told me, what happens? And I'd be like, well, if you get your GPA up, nothing, right? It's just, if you don't get your GPA up and they ask me, were you cooperative? I'm going to say no. But no teeth, optional elements for your students who are coming in. And then the other piece of that is that it's very like, so you're saying those students oftentimes are registering late. So you don't have this runway to be able to say, we're going to get you engaged. And so that when school starts. So what I love about that, I know it sounds so silly, but so often when I look at program revamps and I'm like, what problems do you have to solve? They're like, yeah, I don't know. Right. And what you guys did such a good job of saying is like these 3 problems. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to redesign it so that we make sure we have each of these elements addressed with your coaching, with your seminar class beforehand, and then with your learning strategies. But Debbie, the other thing that you guys did that I love so much is that we were saying earlier, like process versus content. And for first year students, it's really, really tricky because you have content. How do we use our LMS? What are college courses like? How do I talk to my faculty, right? How do I study? But you also have embedded in Warrior Thrive all of this process where it's like, get to know your people and make a list of people who will be happy with you when you do something great or that you can lean on when you're really struggling. So how did you decide how to put those things together? Like the ratio of process versus content in this program, how did you settle on that?
Well, I guarantee I did not consciously think about the ratio of process versus content. Again, wish that I were that forward thinking. But like my natural bend is, it goes back to that unconditional positive regard. That if you know that I care, I love Relationship Rich Education by Lambert and Felton.
Yes.
Like love. That's embedded into our work also. So part of the hook is, oh, somebody cares about what I'm doing. So 2 of the components, there's at least one piece that's not optional. For the academic coaching, we will not register them for classes until they have met with an academic coach.
Yeah.
Now, they can blow off the coaching meetings once they get here. We can't really force them to do that. But the students who do it seem to do better because, and I don't think it's because we're really giving brilliant information through the coaching sessions. I hope that the content is good also, but it's that connecting with the person. And then we also automatically put them in the practical applications class. And like for me, the first year I taught that class, I really didn't care about any of the content. Like the content was going to be study skills, but the content was really just a medium to build a relationship.
Yep.
To create opportunities with the students to say, hey, I care about you. So I had one student, do I have time for a quick story? Not much,
please.
But I had a student who was trying to get enough credits to become eligible. And it had a previous record that wasn't stellar. And so I was working on building a relationship. It's amazing the difference it makes when you like attend sporting events.
Yeah.
But this particular student regularly came to class late. And so I had the opportunity to say, hey, stay after class. I just have a question for him. Like, talk to me about this. So I noticed this. Typically for a teacher, that sends this kind of message. Can you tell me what's going on? And not only did we have, it strengthened our relationship, but it also was fairly effective in helping him improve. And for me, and I told the student, I was like, I don't care, but your other instructors are going to care. So this class, Practical Applications of Learning Strategies, is kind of like a laboratory.
Right.
Where you can experiment with behaviors. And if you are engaged in behaviors that I know are going to be counterproductive in other classes, we're going to talk about that.
Yeah. So good.
And so
practice, right? We're going to practice. Yeah.
Right. And so, yes, they still had to there was content and we used that. But again, the content was really a medium for building the relationships and getting them securely established with a strong academic record.
Yeah. It's so good because I think sometimes people get confused that the content is the thing. And sometimes it is. Like you do have to, do something, like you do have to teach them some stuff, but for sure it's that relationship. I was reading your paper about kind of what was the most helpful thing about the seminar class. And I love the quotes you included because they are so reflective of what students experience, which is all over the board, right? Mm-hmm. They're like, it helped me find a purpose and be successful. The best thing was it helped me understand how Canvas, your LMS, works, right? Awesome. Great. That is a thing you need to know. And it's going to be hard for you to be successful if you don't know that. Group discussion, seeing other people answering and relating to their answers. So this like, oh, I do belong here. Everybody is kind of struggling with the same thing. I found it helpful that for every topic, there was an opposite perspective mentioned. It's a great smattering of like, you can't guess what's going to resonate with students. You just have to kind of say, these are all of the things we're going to cover. And this class might not be it for you, but we are continuing to establish this relationship in what we're doing. So you have great outcomes of this, like your students who attended their coaching sessions. It's like, is it 100%?
It's been a minute since I've looked at that data. I think if they attended all three, all of them were back in the spring semester and were probably in good standing.
Yes, 100% of students who completed all three coaching sessions returned for the spring semester. So you do have some really great outcomes. One of the things that you've seen though is that the outcomes for retention, so coming back, are not as high as your persistence. So what's the evolution of the program to try to address that piece?
So we've extended the coaching and it's a little dicey for me because I measure success two ways.
Yeah.
Obviously, we want the students to retain at our institution because we think we're wonderful. But a reality of my institution is we're not always a destination of choice. So it is also successful to me when my students who are conditionally admitted come in, do well, and then transfer somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what matters to me, what really matters, is that they're successful, that they find themselves as a student and maybe even a scholar so that they can go on. Obviously, we really want to keep them there, and I'm pretty sure they're not going to get the kind of attention they got with us if they go somewhere else. But so our retention, a little bit of the drop in retention is those students who were like, wow, I am actually a good student. What are my other options?
Yeah.
Some of them, though, still struggle. So we're still trying to figure out how do we help them. Their grades the second semester, even with that first group, were not as high as their first semester grades. So we had to evaluate, was there maybe some grade inflation because we were too generous with the practical applications grades? Yeah. I was grateful to discover that most of our students who did well in that class also passed their composition class with a C or better. So I'm like, okay,
it's not
we're
crazy.
Not just giving this away.
Yeah.
But we're trying to enhance that, keep the coaches with them for the full year, especially for the students who might be on morning after their first semester. And even for the students who did well, leaving it as an option for them. We want the students to have agency. If they're doing well, then, hey, we're here to help you. So if we're helpful, let's keep doing it. If your time is better used elsewhere, that's fine too.
The idea that you're giving them the opportunity, right, to continue that relationship if they found it helpful.
Yep.
Okay, I have one last question for you. So as you're thinking about student success and support in the future and in higher education, just in general, so not just at your institution, what hope do you have about programs like Warrior Thrive and how that's going to continue to evolve into student success in the future?
My hope is for students like ours. Like, we're not getting most of the time the cream of the crop, the really high GPA students. So I hope that things like this can become more standard. I hope that students take more advantage of community college. Yeah. I want to see more of the students who aren't sure that they're really college material find themselves in that environment and really find themselves and discover that I really didn't necessarily excel in K through 12, but here in this environment, it's different. And learning is not what I thought it was. So that's what I hope that we can continue to build, especially for the students who might not see themselves that way.
Absolutely. It is building that self-efficacy and saying like you can be successful. And also what I think is so important about what you just said is that there are the majority of institutions who are now enrolling non-traditional students, first generation students, right? And it is a problem we have to solve. At every institution, at every level, you have groups of students who you have to build better programs to support them because like you said, when we admit you, we are saying we believe you can be successful here. And so we better do a really good job of building that scaffolding, not just for your first year, but so that you can be successful in whatever you choose to do in the future. So it's such an important conversation because I think in the coming years, this conversation is going to be replicated on colleges and universities all over the United States as they try to figure out for the population that we're serving, what are we going to do so that they can go on to be successful? So Warrior Thrive, I think, is a great model of that. And you've just done such a good job on your campus of weaving together all of these parts, whether you have articulated or not, putting them all together so that your students can be successful. So awesome job. It's always good to talk to you.
Always good to talk to you also.
All right, let's see. We're off next week, and then we will be back the week after to talk about something. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but it will be thrilling. Debbie, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, bye.